in 1948, just before and immediately after Israel's declaration of independence, an estimated 700,000 Palestinians left their homes in the state of Israel and took their keys, expecting to return to their homes after the Arab armies said that they would destroy the new state of Israel. And they did not. Israel successfully fought off those armies, and the Palestinians settled in camps, now built up neighborhoods in West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan. The Palestinians call that evacuation the Nakba, or Great Catastrophe. Is the Nakba the responsibility of Israel? And I will start with you, please.
The Nakba, the ethnic cleansing, the genocide, all this type of allegations is the failing attempt of the loser that wants to turn defeat into something else. It's a culture that is based on honor and shame, not right and wrong. It's very shameful, and it has been for the Arab leaderships to just accept defeat. And if you don't accept defeat, you can never know victory, by the way. So they call it a Nakba. It's a disaster. But who's responsible for that disaster? Was it the Arab miscalculation when Israel was extremely outnumbered and they came with this inflated Arabian ego, thinking that they are going to make the Jews into a food of the fish of the sea? They used to say, you know Arabic, تَجَوَّعْ يَا سَمَكَ الْبَحْرِ. This was the slogan, marching towards to annihilate the Jewish people. It was a big shock. My grandmother was asked to evacuate her farm as hundreds of thousands of Arabs left their farms because the Arab armies told them, you must evacuate. After we cleanse the land of the Jews, you can return to your homes. I don't need the United Nations to come educate me about anything because my grandmother is an eyewitness and she gave me her experience. This is what they told her. This is why she left her farm, because she was afraid to get caught up in the war. And the Arabs lost the war, and my grandmother never returned back to her farm. But you know what's amazing? My grandmother started her life again in the village of Bir Zayt near Ramallah and was able to start over and be very successful, sent all her children to get education. And what's remarkable about her? She never spoke anything bad about Israel. She never used the term Nakba. She never used the term occupation or colonialism. For her, it was a loss, and I think deep in her soul, she knew that the Arab armies misguided the entire population, Arab population. They weren't Palestinians at that time. So when we talk about Nakba, catastrophe, whatever they want to name it, it's just a concept. Who's responsible for that, in my opinion? The Arab arrogance.
The Nakba, when we talk about settler colonialism, to quote settler colonial theorist Patrick Wolf, it's never an event, it's a structure, it's a process. The Nakba isn't just about 1948, it's not just about 1947 to 1949 over the course of war. It's about a series of processes that led to the ultimate expulsion of the Palestinian people. But if we want to speak specifically about the expulsion of the 770,000 people, again, you've acknowledged at the beginning that you don't necessarily rely upon scientists and law and thinkers and historians. But no, I'm not saying that derisively. I mean, you're saying that you're relying on a very particular narrative. But historians dispute that narrative. Israeli historians dispute that narrative. I could show you 1,000 Palestinian historians that dispute this narrative. You say, well, yeah, they got a a nickel in that quarter. But the leading is, I mean, the very idea of the new historians in Israel, whether it's Benny Mars, whether it's Avi Shleim, whether it's Ilan Pape, who y'all might not be as in love with, all of them acknowledge that the expulsion of 700 to 770,000 Palestinians was not because they all said, we'll just leave, wait for this, war to end in a few days and we'll come back to the house with all the Jews gone. That's simply untrue. I'm basing that not on my own opinion, but on historical records, on oral histories, on now archaeological evidence. There's not really a lot of dispute among Israeli historians that this happened. Now, there are people like Benny Morris argue, not that it didn't happen, they're saying it had to happen. That if we had let the Palestinians back in, they would have been disloyal, they would have been violent, we couldn't have had a stable country. You might agree with that claim, but we can't just pretend that it's not true just because we don't like it. We can't pretend. It would be like me saying October 7th didn't happen, that 1,139 Jewish people weren't killed. It happened. Regardless of what we think about it, it happened. These are historical events. Deir Yassin is one of the most violent and horrific massacres of the 20th century. The Deir Yassin village was a depopulated village, but it was also a massacred village. The children who were left from Deir Yassin were put, as you know, in Hind el-Husseini, what's the word, Maitam, an orphanage in Jerusalem because all their parents had been killed. Many villages had been burned down or depopulated. There were numerous reasons for the 770,000 people to go. Some was expulsion. Some was fear. Were there some Arab leaders that said, leaving, we'll be back soon? I'm not saying that didn't happen at all, but that was not the overwhelming reason for the people leaving. They left because they were killed. They were intimidated. Some of the more dominant Arab leaders left. There were lots of reasons, but it wasn't just because they didn't want to. But even if they did, and this is my last 2 seconds, they still have a right to return. Just because you don't like them doesn't mean they can't come back.
Okay,
there are rules to this.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think if anybody has the right to return, is the Jewish people who were forced to leave their property from all the Arab countries, and they were ethnically cleansed. This is the very definition of ethnic cleansing. When you force people, you give them 24-hour notice to leave their property, their jewelry, everything they had, and depart on a boat into the unknown. This is what the Arab countries did. And by the way, I didn't say that I don't adapt science. What is more scientific than first-hand experience, direct perception, and observation? Those are the basis of science. Did I say that I was anti-science? But if your scientific theory contradicts with my first-hand experience, then your theory is invalid. Then you keep coming back to the point of colonialism, occupation, and Palestine. I told you there is no such a thing as Palestine, and I mean my word when I say there was no such a thing as Palestine. You cannot prove it. It never existed. And if it did exist, give me the name of the Palestinian president at that time or emperor. There is no such a thing. Palestinian, Yasser Arafat, the Palestinian revolution. They borrowed a colonial entity as their national identity. This is the joke about what's so-called Palestinian. And this is why I don't agree to myself to be called Palestinian. First of all, I was born as Jordanian. This was the nationality of my birth. And I dropped that. But my ethnicity, we are Arabs. Since when we became Palestinians? So you are representing the case as there was such a thing as Palestine. Then the Zionists came and wiped them out. And now they have the right to return. They were never there. And when they were evacuated the region, because they wanted the Jews to die, those who stayed in the region, they are still until now. There are 2 million of them. And Israel did not return the favor. This is a very important point. Israel did not return the favor by displacing the Arabs within its own borders, like the Arab countries did with the Jews. Ethnic cleansing happened in the Arab countries. I met some of these people from Egypt, first-hand people. I met them and they told me their stories. Israel did not give the Arabs 24-hour notice to leave the territory after the 1967 war.
I'm going to respond to the parts that I think are germane to the question, just because there's a lot of points in only 2 minutes. You're saying that you're juxtaposing your firsthand experience with my abstract theory. No, you weren't there in 1948. I wasn't there in 1948. You're saying that I agree with you. And there were 700,000 other grandmothers there who also have accounts. And so rather than going on individual anecdotes, because I'm going on, I've done oral histories with the very same grandmothers that you have, right? Neither of us were there. And what I'm saying is the people whose job it is, the experts who have collected these narratives, as well as the legal documents, as well as all the evidence shows that the 700,000 people didn't just leave thinking that they were going to have a quick mollywopping, to use a technical term, and then come right back. That's not what happened. There's just no evidence of that. And just continuing to say that there was doesn't make that true. I agree with you that there were Jews in Egypt, actually Egypt less so, but Jews in Arab countries around the world who were kicked out. I agree. But again, you're arguing a point I never made. I never said they weren't. What I'm saying is just because Jews were kicked out of these countries, which is wrong, doesn't mean that we replicate that behavior somewhere else. We have to hold the same standard. I agree 1,000% that a Jewish person in many Arab countries around the world was isolated. Remember, 20 minutes ago, I said Jews have never been safe anywhere in the globe, especially as a minority. I agree with you. That's not where we're disagreeing. The question is, once you begin the formation of the Israeli nation state, do we do the same thing again? And those people who left, you're saying that those who stayed in the borders are Israeli citizens. Yes. The problem is the people who left, those 700,000 people who left, which again is indisputable by Israeli historians, even the most ultra right-wing Zionists acknowledge that they were kicked out. They just say they should have been kicked out. You're like the only person who's saying they weren't kicked out. They actually were. They're just disputing about why. But those people, even those people who were kicked out, they're in the refugee camps. They're in the West Bank. They're like your grandmother who now is in, you said Ramallah or Birzeit, right? They weren't allowed back in because the only way that you can have an ethno-state is with a demographic majority. And you can't have a demographic majority if you have more Arabs there than non-Arabs. And that is why expulsion, according to the Israeli historian Benny Morris and others, was necessary.
Thank you.
And how you explain the 2 million Arabs who are Israeli citizens today? Where did they come from? And why, if Israel demonstrated ethnic cleansing against Arabs, okay, and forced the people to leave, then how today we have 2 million? 2 million. This is about 25% of the Israeli population. And they are a fundamental part of the Israeli society. They are very proud Israeli citizens. By the way, they will not change their national identity with any other national identity. If you tell them you want to become Jordanians or Egyptians, they would laugh at you. So where did these people come from? If it was a systematic ethnic cleansing, why would you miss 2 million people in the process?
We'll give you like a minute or so.
Again, these are straw men. You're making it sound as if I said that they got rid of everybody or that people popped in out of nowhere. What I said was, to be clear, in order to maintain an ethno-state or to create one, you need a demographic majority. To create the majority, these 700,000+ people were expelled. Again, that is not historically disputable. You might dispute on the why or the if or the shoulds, but the fact that it happened is indisputable. And yes, there are 2 million, give or take, people who are Arab citizens of Israel. And they do account for about 19% of the Israeli population. I don't dispute that. Now, you and I will disagree about their full involvement and full participation inside of the Israeli government. Do they have full citizenship rights? Absolutely. But there's more to citizenship than just what we call, what do you call it? Just a particular technical term, but basically, there's different levels of belonging in the same way that as a black person in the United States in 1953, I had full citizenship rights, but there are things I couldn't do, right? Similarly, if you were to talk to someone from Beta Israel, which I've done, I've spent the last 10 years in South Tel Aviv, in Jaffa, talking to Beit Israel, Ethiopian Jews. And they have a different account. When I talk to Mizraim, some say, we love it. We're full citizens. Others have different things. If you go to idala.org, and there are more than, I believe now the number is 58, might be 60 laws that are discriminatory to non-Jews in Israel based on ethnicity, based on this thing that you're talking about. So it's not that simple. It's more complicated than that.
And just to be clear, you're saying that what happened with the 700,000 was an expulsion as opposed to an evacuation by the Arabs in Israel.
Yeah, if people leave and you don't let them back, that's an expulsion. Yes.
Well, no, I'm talking about when it first happened. Were they expelled at the time when they were told by Arabs, or by whom?
What I'm saying, again, I laid all that out. I said there was a small number of people who were told by Arab leaders to leave and come back.
Okay.
But I said many left because of the massacres. We wouldn't say Deir Yassin was a...
I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.